There's a room beneath an old monastery in Toledo where the walls still weep, not with water but with memory, where iron rings hang empty from stone ceilings and the floor remains stained darker than any shadow should be. If you listen closely, some say you can still hear it, the echo of a prayer that was never answered, a confession that was never true, and a scream that believed it was singing to God. This is not a ghost story. This is history. And what makes it terrifying is that every word of it is real. The year is 1478, and Spain has just won a war that lasted 7 centuries. The Reconquest is over, the Moors have been driven out, the land is finally Christian again, or so they say. But King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella know something the common people don't. Winning a kingdom is easy compared to keeping it. Beneath the surface, Spain is fracturing. Jews who converted to Christianity are still suspected of practicing in secret. Muslims who took baptism are whispered about in marketplaces. Even devout Catholics are unsafe from the paranoia that's beginning to spread like plague through the streets. The crown needs more than soldiers to hold this nation together. They need fear, they need purity, they need God on their side, or at least the appearance of it. And so, with a PayPal blessing and a stroke of a pen, the Spanish Inquisition is born. But this is not a court of law. This is a holy machine designed to extract obedience from the soul itself. Its targets are the conversos, former Jews and Muslims who converted under pressure, and anyone else whose faith seems just a little too convenient, a little too quiet, a little too different. The accused are given no trial in any real sense. They don't see their accusers, they don't hear the evidence. A jealous neighbor, a scorned lover, a servant with a grudge. Any of them can submit an anonymous accusation, and once your name is written down, the church will come for you, not to ask questions, but to break you open until the truth, or something close enough, spills out. The Inquisition operates on a theology of suffering. They believe pain is a sacrament. They believe the body, when tortured, reveals what the tongue refuses to say. A confession extracted through agony is not seen as false, it's seen as purified, burned clean of lies by the fire of affliction. And so in dimly lit chambers beneath monasteries and fortresses, instruments of unimaginable cruelty are blessed, oiled, and prepared. The priests who operate them do not see themselves as monsters, they see themselves as shepherds, guiding lost souls back to God, one scream at a time. There is a rope hanging from the ceiling. There is a table with wheels at both ends. There is a small metal object that looks almost delicate, almost beautiful, until you understand what it does. And somewhere in the dark, a man in black robes is already sharpening his questions, because the Inquisition doesn't wait for you to sin. It assumes you already have. If you've made it this far, you're not here by accident. You're here because you want to understand the darkest corners of history, the places where faith and fear became indistinguishable. If that's true, then subscribe, because this channel goes where others won't. We don't sanitize the past. We face it, and trust me, what comes next will stay with you long after the video ends. The first tool they use is called the strapido, and it begins with a simple rope. Your hands are tied behind your back. You're told to stand still. Then, without warning, the rope is pulled, and your body is hoisted into the air. For a moment, you're suspended, weightless. Arms wrenched backward until your shoulders feel like they're tearing from the inside. And then they let go. You fall, but not to the ground. The rope catches you mid-drop, and the force of your own body dislocates both arms at once. The pain is instant, blinding, absolute. You can't breathe, you can't think. You can only feel your bones grinding where they shouldn't be, your joints screaming in ways you didn't know were possible. And then, as you hang there sobbing, they pull you up again. This is not punishment, this is prayer. This is how they make you speak to God. Some lasted minutes before they confessed. Others held out for hours, biting through their own tongues to keep from screaming the names their torturers wanted to hear. But silence was never an option, because the Inquisition had patience, and worse, it had more tools. If gravity couldn't break you, they would stretch you instead. The rack was a table fitted with rollers on each end, and when you were strapped to it, arms and legs spread wide, you probably thought the worst part was the fear. You were wrong. The worst part was the slowness, because the rack didn't snap your bones in an instant. It pulled them apart one agonizing turn at a time. Cranked by crank, your body lengthened beyond its natural limits. Ligaments tore like wet parchment. Joints separated with soft pops that echoed in the stone chamber. And still, the Inquisitor stood beside you, whispering questions, waiting for your breath to hitch, for your will to collapse, for you to give him what he wanted. Sometimes it was a name. Sometimes it was a confession to sins you'd never committed. It didn't matter. The truth was whatever you said when the pain became unbearable. But perhaps the most insidious device of all was the one they called the pear of anguish. It looked harmless, almost ornamental, a small metal object shaped like a bulb with intricate engravings on its surface. But inside it held a screw mechanism that allowed it to expand. This instrument was inserted into the mouth, the rectum, or the vagina, depending on the sin you were accused of. Then the screw was turned. Slowly, deliberately. The metal petals opened outward, tearing tissue, rupturing muscle, splitting you from the inside where no one could see the damage but everyone could hear your muffled agony. Women accused of witchcraft or adultery suffered this most often, their bodies violated in the name of purity. their screams swallowed by the very device that destroyed them. There were no marks on the outside, no visible wounds, just the quiet, internal ruin that left survivors unable to speak, unable to eat, unable to ever feel whole again. And the priests called it correction. But the Inquisition wasn't content to torture in secret. They wanted the world to watch. The Autodor F, the Act of Faith, was a public spectacle designed to remind everyone what happened to those who strayed. The condemned were dressed in San Benito's rough tunics painted with flames and demons, and paraded through the streets while crowds gathered. Children were brought to watch. Nobles attended in their finest clothes. Vendors sold food as if it were a carnival. And at the center of it all, tied to wooden stakes, were human beings about to be burned alive. The fire was lit slowly, giving the condemned time to repent, to beg forgiveness, to scream for mercy that would never come. Some died from smoke inhalation before the flames reached them. Others were not so fortunate. Their skin blistered and blackened, their hair ignited, their voices cracked and faded into something that no longer sounded human. And through it all, the priests chanted, claiming this was love, that the fire was God's embrace, that suffering was the only path to salvation. But for those whose will could not be broken by pain or flame, there was something worse. Silence, deep beneath the prisons. In holes carved into the earth, the oubliettes waited. These were pits of total darkness. No light, no sound, no contact. A prisoner was lowered inside and left to exist in nothingness. Days became indistinguishable from nights. The mind, starved of stimulus, began to unravel. Some forgot their own names, others clawed at the walls until their fingers bled. And when they were finally pulled out, many could no longer speak. They had been erased, not by torture, but by absence. The Inquisition understood something profound and horrifying. You don't need to destroy the body to destroy a person. Sometimes all you need is time and silence. The Spanish Inquisition lasted for more than 3 centuries. It claimed thousands of lives and shattered countless more. It turned neighbors into informants, faith into a weapon, and suffering into a sacrament. The tools have rusted, the fires have gone cold. But the lesson remains. When power cloaks itself in righteousness, when cruelty calls itself love, when punishment is dressed up as salvation, the innocent have nowhere left to hide. History doesn't repeat, but it echoes, and if we forget what happened in those dark chambers beneath the monasteries of Spain, we risk hearing those echoes grow louder. So tell me, in the comments below, when does faith become fear? When does justice become cruelty? And how do we make sure that the machinery of suffering, once dismantled, never gets rebuilt again? Because the past is watching, and it wants to know if we've learned anything at all.